The 7 last words from the cross. The second word. Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.
The good thief had come to a bad end. We do not know which crime had led to his horrible punishment. Hanging from his cross next to Jesus, he is, however, saved in a final moment of insight, in an act of remembrance. What kindles his faith is the memory that God once promised a Redeemer, a Messiah to gather Israel and establish a new kingdom. So, despite the fact that all he sees is a man bruised and beaten, convicted as a criminal, he is able to recognize in Jesus his King and his Savior. Despite the fact, or we might say precisely because, for so spoke the prophecies of old, "Behold, my servant shall prosper, he shall be exalted and lifted up." Many were astonished at him, his appearance so marred beyond human semblance. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our sin. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole, and by his wounds we are healed. Hence the good thief entreats Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Memory for memory. He asks Jesus but to spare a thought for him, and his request may seem modest, but his faith receives a reward beyond measure. Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus' reference to paradise should strike us, for nowhere else does he use this word in the Gospels, a word that literally means garden. Jesus responds to the good thief's act of remembrance by subsuming it in a much larger narrative, stretching back to the very beginning, to the garden where humanity was first created, the original paradise. Such is the kingdom to come, which in its embrace touches all time and memory. Remember, O good thief, the vast history that reaches until today, of which you have now become part. Today, Jesus has reversed the long defeat, our exile from paradise, and opened its gates again. Remember the great sorrow that burdened Adam and Eve when they were expelled from Eden. But Christ has now entered a new garden, Gethsemane, and faced agony and the fear of death. Remember how our first parents lost the sovereignty over creation and the cosmos fell into disorder. But Christ has now been crowned and hailed as King, with a crown of thorns and a cross for throne, and draws all things to himself. Remember how Adam and Eve felt shame after they sinned and saw that they were naked and hid from the presence of God. But Christ has been stripped and mocked and held up in the sight of all peoples, and has entered the final moment of dread, the experience of God's silence. Remember how Eve, mother of the living, ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But now Mary, mother of Jesus, stands at the foot of the cross, the tree of life, beholding Christ become the Lamb of sacrifice, the bread from heaven that brings life and peace and reconciliation with God. Rejoice, O good thief, for today the kingdom begins, the flaming sword is removed, and we may at last return home.